And there's a lot of questions about whether the Messiah will build the temple, whether we'll build the temple, whether we'll start building the temple.
When October 7th happened, very quickly, Hamas started claiming that literally they started this war and invaded Israel because of some red cows that were in Shiloh. And literally Hamas is saying, like, this is what the war is about. And that...
We have a tradition that the 10th one will be to purify Israel for the Messiah.
Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, pleasure to be with you again. I think I would have to say, maybe this is a bold statement, maybe I'm putting myself out there, but I think you're probably the most interesting Jew I know in all of Israel. You are such a fascinating person. You've written 5,000 plus articles. I would say 90% of them about redemption would be called Geulah in Israel, which, I mean, is there anybody else writing about this? Maybe today there's starting to be more, but 10 years ago when you first started writing, nobody was writing about Geulah, was there?
Like the Grateful Dead said, we're not the best at what we do. We're the only ones who do what we do. I'm not.
You were writing about it before it was cool.
I was writing about it before it was cool. I'm not so sure it's cool today. I think I was the first, and I still might be the only Orthodox Jew. What I'm actually doing is translating what Orthodox Jews are seeing and what they see from a Jewish perspective, and I'm translating it and putting it in a context that non-Jews can understand. And I'm actually very surprised, and pleasantly so, the response from Christians. I'll give you an example. I wrote a story about foxes on the Temple Mount. Now, for Jews, there's a story in the Talmud about foxes appearing on the Temple Mount, and some rabbis are crying there because there's a prophecy that wild animals
Jeremiah,
will be...
right?
Right. The wild animals will run through the Holy of Holies, and that's a sign that, it's the destruction of the temple. And Rabbi Akiva was laughing, and they said, "Why are you laughing?" And he said, "Well, you believe those prophecies, and there's other prophecies that... it's going to be rebuilt. So if these prophecies came true, these prophecies will come true." Mm-hmm. So I didn't expect Christians to be interested in a Talmudic prophecy, a Talmudic approach to prophecy. And oddly enough, they were, which really shocked me. My experiences is that there are enough Christians who really want the straight story. They don't want me to make nice. I'm not doing interfaith. Interfaith is we're all the same, kumbaya, and there's no differences. What I'm saying is, there are differences, and I'm going through a Jewish Geulah, and you have a different approach because you're a Christian. Let's help each other walk this path together differently.
Right. Yeah. Which I just think is fascinating. And we'll get into more about your work with, you have so many interactions with Christians now and people from all over the world. I do want to mention we're going to talk about your new book, Return of the Red Heifers. The red heifer, the topic of the red heifers, which is probably the most viral subject to ever come out of Israel.
Which I can't figure out, but okay.
Yeah, no, I can't either. No, I absolutely cannot figure it out. I want to get into that in a few minutes, but I think it would be really interesting for people to know a little bit more about you. Millions, tens of millions of people know you, even if they don't know your face or your voice because of your articles. You've been writing for Israel 365 News, now formerly Breaking Israel News, about prophecy for 10 years now?
10 years.
But if you could, I know you hate talking about your own story, but you came from America, came from a secular background, right?
Conservative Jewish, but secular, yeah.
Yeah. So how and when did you come to Israel, and what was your journey?
My family was we were strongly secular. We had a lot of traditions. We had a kosher home. We didn't keep Shabbos. And I went to a Hebrew day school, which was kind of like Hebrew day school light, Solomon Schechter. And when I graduated high school, I went to college. And actually before that, when I was 17 in 1978, I came to Israel for an Ulpan. It was a program that my school had. So I was 7 months in Israel. And it was the first time in my life that I was actually excited about something. Yeah. I was one of these gifted kids who never cared about school. But when I came to Israel, I really felt like I woke up. I was like, my gosh, this is like everything. I saw the Kotel, I saw the Western Wall, I nearly passed out. I'm like, I've been seeing photos of these rocks since I was a kid, and now here I am. I remember going to En Gedi, and the guide said, this is where King David was. And there was this little plateau, like as big as this room. And I'm like, how do you know it was here? She's like, well, it overlooked, this is it. And I'm like, I'm walking, you mean King David, like Psalms and all that? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. And I realized that this was significant. And I went back to America, went to college, got lost. And I dropped out of college and I had to make a living. So I went to Manhattan and I worked in fancy French restaurants cooking. And I literally burned out. I was trying to throw my soul off the highest cliff I could find. I was going out and doing horrible things because I guess I hated myself. And when I was 30, I was totally burned out. And Grateful Dead were on summer tour. So I went on summer tour with the Grateful Dead. And I gave my brain a vacation. And when I came back, I said, I've been living a dream, but it's not my dream. It's someone else's dream. Now I need my dream. And I had no idea what it was. Mm-hmm. 4 months later, I was on a plane to Israel.
Wow.
And I landed in Kibbutz Eliyahu. I had long hair, earrings, black leather jacket, black leather boots. And they looked at me, they said, great, we have no need for a French chef. I'm like, but that's all I do. They said, no, it's not all you do. And they taught me how to raise baby cows. So I became a dairy farmer on a religious kibbutz. No idea how that happened, but there I was. And I did that for 4 years and I loved it. And it was the beginning steps I took towards Hashem were rediscovering nature. God is in nature. Nature is proof of God. That's why so many people who live in cities are anti-God and anti-Bible. If you see calves being born, if you see, little kids, your neighbors, if you watch them grow up because you have a community, you don't believe in God. You know there's God. You see the seasons change. In New York City, there are no seasons. There's no stars at night. There's just too much light from the buildings. So rediscovering nature, reconnecting with nature were my first steps. And then I wanted to run away from God and he didn't let me. So I ended up in yeshiva in Bat Ayin in Gush Etzion, where I said, I'll stay here till I found my wife. And it took way too long. So I stayed way too long. And here I am living in the Golan. I moved to the Golan and I have a wife and 4 kids.
Did you serve in the IDF?
I served in the IDF about a year after I moved to Israel. I was 30 years old, but things were different back then. I think they're going to go back to it where they need people. The army is, they do what's good for the army. And at that time, they had a real shortage of combat medics. And I went to the interview and I said, I give infusions all the time. I help in surgery and I see blood and disgusting things and guts. And I've been inside people messing with, and they're like, really? What do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a dairy farmer, When there's a birth, I grab the sticks and pull, But it was good enough. And I learned how to be a combat medic. And I only did 4 months, but then every year I was gone 2 or 3 times a year for reserve duty. I did the army. Mm-hmm. Not real army, but army.
Right, but I saw enough. Experienced enough. I remember you told me as a combat medic, I think you experienced some of what we've seen and put on camera here on our channel of how fake a lot of what the Western media shows.
Right. Like there was a time, I think what you're referring to is there was a time I was serving inside Ramallah. It was the last year that Yasser Arafat was alive. I was in a base called the DCO, which is literally half the IDF and half Palestinian policemen with a chain link fence in the middle. We were looking at each other every day, wanting to kill each other. And they liked me at the front gate because I was a settler and I'm used to having Arabs look at me and want to kill me all day. But I'm not used to doing that with snipers all around.
Yeah.
That was actually comforting. But like very quickly, within the first few days, we all of a sudden started seeing press vehicles show up. And I'm like, the press? And they set up their cameras and half an hour later, the Palestinians showed up and started throwing rocks at the police. And there was one army jeep. And these guys, wow, they were professional. With one, I think he was a Druzi, border policemen, they were able to direct the entire crowd. But we knew that they were going to come because of the press.
Right.
It's all a show.
It was scheduled, yeah.
And some of the press, we'd see the ambulances would go out and pick up the injured Palestinians, take them back behind the building.
Injured Palestinians.
Yeah, and they'd get out and they'd go back to throwing rocks. I had a rough time because I empathized with the ambulance drivers, and I was kind of like giving him half a check and letting him through. One time my officer said, no. And he stopped them, and we went in the back, and they were transporting people and weapons, because ambulances are great for transportation. So
it also looks great though on the news for see the Israeli occupation military stopping an ambulance. Right, I've seen it too, but like you're saying, they have terrorists hiding in them, they have weapons hiding in them, transporting explosives.
And you see media acting as human shields or taking part in throwing rocks and stuff like that. It's really theater, and it's horrible. But there you go.
Great news, guys. Israel Summit live stream tickets are available June 9th through 11th. Even if you cannot make it in person, for just a few dollars, you can get live access to all of the inspiring speakers, including Ambassador David Friedman, Michelle Bachmann, Eric Stackelbeck, Yishai Fleischer, Jeremy and Ari, obviously a concert by the Israeli hit duo Yonina, and much, much more. No matter where you are in the world, if you can't make it to Texas, you can be equipped and inspired to fight and stand on behalf of Israel and Israel's biblical heartland. Just visit the link in the description below for all of the details. Remember, it's just $35 to get access for you and your entire family to a life-changing 3-day event from the comfort of your own home. Act fast. You don't want to wait. The summit is coming up very soon. You can get live stream access right now. Click the link in the description below to learn more. We experienced a riot firsthand. We captured it on film at the entrance of Shechem, which is another one of the Arab strongholds here. 100% a sham, because you had hundreds of Arabs rioting with burning tires and throwing rocks and the masks and the smoke and everything. You had all the press lined up, including mainstream Associated Press, lined up on the side of the road. And then there was just an empty road. Like, there was no IDF. There was nobody there. They were literally throwing rocks at an empty road, but all the cameras were pointed towards the riot. The IDF was way up. We actually we stood with the IDF to film from up on the side of the hill, because the IDF was like, well, they're not harming anything. We'll just stand up here and monitor them and make sure that nobody gets hurt, right? But you had all the ambulances driving in, picking people up, carrying them out. There was nothing going on.
There's one major organization, I think it might even be the only one, that provides images, photos for the media. It's called Flash 90.
Yeah.
They do amazing stuff, but they have 2 Jewish photographers, and all the other photographers are Arabs. Right. I remember there was what they called the metal detector riots, where Israel wanted to. There was a terrorist attack, and 2 Druze policemen were killed on the Temple Mount, and they have video of the weapons coming out of the Dome of the Rock. You know, that's where they were storing the weapons. So the police said, we got to start putting up metal detectors, because the Arabs, they can go in, they don't get checked at all, nothing. And the Arabs started rioting. And I called Flash 90. I'm like, the only photos you have are Arabs praying. Like, they're also rioting, and I got to write about that. And they're like, well, if you don't like the pictures, go somewhere else.
Except there is nowhere else.
There is nowhere else.
Well, and non-Arab photographers and cameramen wouldn't survive inside the Arab areas.
They have 2, and they go.
You can't go into Nablus and Ramallah and Al-Aqsa as a non-Arab photographer, because you wouldn't survive it. Like, that's just the reality.
But you know something? What we've learned in the Gaza war is there can be video, and it still won't make a difference. People believe what they want to believe. I mean, the whole thing in the Al-Shifa hospital, I think it was the Al-Shifa, where they actually showed the rocket coming from Gaza, and more than a third of their rockets are shortfalls and land inside Gaza, hitting the hospital. They had audio recordings of the Arabs saying, oh, yeah, we just hit our own hospital. And still,
nobody cared.
Nobody cared. They said 500 people were killed, and no one will ever say how many Gazans have been killed by Hamas.
Right. No, never.
So
because it's not interesting and the world just doesn't care.
Right. So the truth is, which after you did that video on the riot, I was like, I'll take a bullet for these guys. These guys are awesome.
Well, we used to get ourselves in even more trouble going into the Arab villages because we could pretend to be dumb Americans, tourists, or just let's just say American tourists. But we had a couple of videos go viral, and then we got our pictures posted on Arab social media, which is a badge of honor, by the way. And started getting death threats. So we don't spend it, especially after October 7th.
And also on the Temple
Mount. Don't really
Mount,
go much in those areas anymore.
Also in the Temple Mount, the Waqif, the Arabs, they hate Jews who go up to the Temple Mount, but they hate you guys more.
Yeah.
Because you're Christian allies. So you're not buying their narrative. And if it's like the emperor's new clothes. The minute you say, gee, the Palestinians maybe Hamas is lying about the people who were killed. As soon as you say that, they're like, that's the biggest threat to them.
Right. Yeah.
Is maybe people will start believing the truth.
100%. Yeah. So back to your personal story. So you spent like 10 years in Bahrain, which if people don't know, I
spent 15 years.
15 years. Wow. Yeah. Which is a Jewish community, a settlement, right? Like deep in the heart of Judea. It's hardcore, right? Amazing people there, an amazing rabbi there.
Yeah, sure.
So is that kind of where did you start writing for when you were living in Bahrain?
No, I actually started writing after I left Bahrain. I mean, writing, I wrote a novel or two before.
Right.
But I started writing articles after I moved up to the Golan.
Which, just real quick too, I don't think we have time to get into it, but like you have personal experience with terrorism.
Yeah.
Your wife had a miraculous
you can read about it in my book, Master of Return in the 11th. I think it's Master of Return in the 11th Light.
Yeah, we'll link to his books down below so you guys can check them out too. But I mean, like a miracle story. Literally, should have been killed probably, and God. God made a miraculous miracle there.
For me. He said it was hard enough to find you one wife. I'm not going to find you another.
Yeah. So, I mean, like your journey, there's so much in your journey that is just amazing, incredible. But
thank God.
I want to talk about how in the world did you get started with, because I'm guessing you probably never dreamed that you would be like writing for Christians, talking to Christians like every day.
No, no. It was not my...
Like, how did your journey start with that and with the journey of not only writing on a news level, like writing as a reporter for the news in Israel, but like writing on the level of connecting the news to redemption and prophecy?
It's really, to be honest, I needed a job. I moved up to the Golan, and all I knew how to do in my life, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, but my main career was cooking. Mm-hmm. And when I moved up to the Golan, I could not get a job cooking. I was like, I moved up there thinking people eat everywhere. There are restaurants everywhere, but that's not the case.
I can attest to that. Yeah, I remember looking for restaurants in the Golan. They're few and far between.
And so I couldn't find a job. And my wife, God bless her, she said to me, look, if you're sitting around doing nothing, you've always wanted to write, go online. There's freelance sites. And I'm like, yeah, but can I support the family? Almost immediately. And this was all from Hashem. He said, I'm going to show you that writing is a thing you can do. And I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to write. Now I know that I really want people to read my stuff. It's not enough to write.
Yeah.
They got to read it. So my readers are more precious to me than just about anything. And she said, you're sitting at home, start writing. And people who go online to freelance writing, the hard part is getting the jobs. And I was getting jobs like crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. And I did one sort of reporting job for a bit. It was a horrible job. And then Thule hired me, said, look, I'm hiring 6 people. And the last person standing is going to have the job.
Wow.
It's survival of the fittest. And again, Hashem really looked out for me. My first article didn't get any views. I wrote about the Druze and how they're the sons of Jethro, and how we have a covenantal connection with them. It wasn't very interesting. My second article was about how there was a group of rabbis who called themselves the Sanhedrin, and they were putting Obama and the United Nations on trial on Mount Zion. And that went super viral, like crazy. And then my third article was about one of the most prominent rabbis of the generation who has since passed on, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, after a lifetime of just being a regular rabbi or just a very hugely respected rabbi, one of the most respected rabbis in Israel, he started all of a sudden saying, yeah, Messiah's here. And people were like, what's he talking about? He's never said that before. And then they couldn't shut him up.
Huh.
So I started, and I'm like, and like I said, I would think, what do Christians care about that?
Right.
But they were so interested in it. Christians want the truth. You know, they are Christians. They have their beliefs. But if something is happening in Israel with the Jews, they want to know about it, and they want the straight scoop, and that's what I'm giving them.
Right.
I don't makey nice with them. This is not interfaith where it's kumbaya. This is the straight truth, and they come for it more than the Jews, which is crazy.
Was that surprising?
It was surprising until I understood it. The Jews are very comfortable, and the problem is if you start showing them, not saying, but if you show them that things are moving and that the geula, that the redemption is like coming at us like a freight train, well, that means they got to leave their comfort zone. For American Jews, it might mean, hey, time to come home.
Right.
You know? Or it might mean, hey, you know, Shabbat and keeping kosher is not enough. We're going to have to do the temple.
Yeah.
And that's the red heifer. The Christians are so excited about it.
Yeah.
And the Jews are like, because they don't want to. They don't want to.
They don't want their world to be rocked.
Yeah, they're comfortable where they are.
The world's being rocked whether
you want
like
it or
not. Yeah.
And to be honest, one of the things I explain is the red heifers are to purify. It's very important people understand. We're not talking about sin. We're talking about purity and impurity. You can be impure, but never have sinned. You can be pure. You can be sin and be totally pure. As a matter of fact, we talk about impurity from a dead body. We have the Jews who went in to bring Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, out of the tabernacle because they had died. And they went to Moses and they said, look, we want to take part in Passover, but we can't because we're impure because we touched the dead body, which is a huge mitzvah. Right. There's no question they should have done that. And so that's why Moses said, okay, so you get a second chance.
Right.
And that's for Jews because non-Jews don't go up to the Temple Mount. They don't go up to the temple.
The temple, right, yeah.
They don't take part in the temple service.
That non-Jews
right, they can go up to the Temple Mount at this point.
So let's back up with the topic of the red heifer.
Okay.
Because I've mentioned it before. I'm surprised to hear you say the same thing. I still don't fully get what the big deal is about the red heifer. I'm trying to remember my first
I can't help you there.
interaction or my first interaction with the red heifers in the news. Maybe it was when they started talking about bringing the red heifers to Israel.
Right.
Was that 2022?
No.
Before that?
Yeah.
Several years ago.
I mean, they've been searching for the red heifer for like a dozen years, over a decade.
Right. So we were just getting into creating more podcasts, videos. We were putting out a few articles at the time, kind of building our channel. I heard about the red heifers being flown to Israel. I didn't give it a second thought. And you were the only journalist that was invited to cover their arrival at Ben Gurion Airport, right?
That's correct.
So my brother-in-law, Zach Waller, who was our executive director at the time, was also invited, but just as like just to be there. Honestly, I didn't think anything about it. He took a video on his phone, and I'm not even sure I think we posted it on social media just because it was content. Somebody took that video and reposted it to TikTok in a negative way, somehow tied it to like the Antichrist or something.
Right, sure.
And it got like 1 million views.
Right.
And this was like before TikTok was a massive platform, right?
Right.
And I remember being shocked. And then our articles didn't get a lot of views back then, but I think I wrote just a short article, just like, I was like, this is an interesting topic. I'll write about the red heifer. And it got like, I don't know, 10 or 20 times more readers than anything I'd ever gotten before. And that's when I remember my mind just being blown. I was like, what is the deal with the red heifers? Like, why are people so fascinated by this?
I'm totally with you on that. And I'll tell you why. Because if you want to look at the preparations for the third temple, the red heifers are like the last thing, and you don't even need them. You don't even need them. If we wanted to start the temple service right now, We could start it
You don't need the red heifers.
in 3 hours.
Okay.
Everything is ready.
So I was
But
under
we
the
don't need the
impression
red
that you
heifers.
did.
I'll explain. It's a
Okay.
little bit technical, and I apologize, but this is the way we look at it as Jews,
Right.
Which is public time-bound sacrifices can be brought even when you're ritually impure. So what are the public time-bound sacrifices? The twice daily sacrifices, public. It's bought with the public money, and it's time-bound. If you don't bring it by the certain time, you missed it. Most of the feast offerings are public time-bound offerings. The Passover offering, public time-bound offering. You can bring it even if you were ritually impure from proximity to a dead body. So the only thing we really need the red heifers for are the personal offerings, sin offerings, Thanksgiving offerings, wave offerings, dealing with first fruits, things like that, dealing with challah, which is bringing the grain offerings.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that we do need the red heifer for. But, okay, we don't do those. But we really should, honestly.
Like optional offerings.
Yeah. And to be honest, we are, not only can we bring the public time-bound offerings, we are required. As I am sitting here today, I have a biblical mandate, a requirement. And the
It's
only
kind of like part of the requirement for all Jewish men to go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year.
Yeah. Exactly.
Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, right?
Exactly. Bible says to do it. I'm not allowed to ask questions. If I can do it, I do it. I don't say, gee, I don't feel like building a sukkah this year. You got to do it. So that being said, as we said, the Christians don't need the red heifer, but they do. Why? Because they don't take part in the public time-bound offerings. But how do they take part in the temple service? I think a lot of Jews think that the temple service is I show up and got my pigeons and I walk on up and give it to the Kohen and he does the job. That's not it. What's the temple going to look like? I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'll be like walking up to the Temple Mount with my pigeons. And all of a sudden I'll hear someone call me, Eliyahu. Oh, my best friend, Jim Barfield. It's so nice to see you. Eliyahu, I just had a new grandson. Oh, Mazal Tov, that's amazing. I want to bring a Thanksgiving offering. Could you do that for me?
Oh, wow.
The only way I can do that is if I'm purified by the red heifer, because it's not a public time-bound offering. So the only way the Jews can take their biblical role as a priestly nation, acting as priests, serving you guys.
To be a conduit for the nations to bring their offerings to the temple.
The only way I can be a conduit for my dear Christian friends to help them bring their offerings to the God of Israel in Jerusalem, in the house of prayer for all nations, the only way I can do that is if I'm purified by the red heifer.
Right.
Until we have the red heifer, I can't do that. I can do my offerings, I can't do theirs.
That's fascinating. That's incredible. It also helps explain why Christians are so fascinated by the red heifer.
I wonder, I have to tell you, I also started doing videos. I don't like to do videos. I don't, for a lot of reasons. I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I sound. I don't think I really have anything compelling to say, though sometimes something falls out of my mouth.
You're just like a writer by
I'm a writer, right? That's why I was a cook and not a waiter. I liked hiding. I liked hiding away. But I started doing videos because there were so many videos that came out just telling straight up lies about the red heifer. So I felt like I couldn't let the lies stay. And the lies were basically hatred of the Jews, based on the concept of the temple of the Antichrist, and all that. And what I found amazing was Christians who were not educated in Christian theology, who figured, I read a lot of the Bible, some of it.
Or just went to church growing up.
Or just went to church and I didn't fall asleep through all of it. Those people were all over me like flies. Like, oh, Temple of the Antichrist, you look satanic, which I don't know. But all of my dear, dear, dear friends who were devout Christians, who were learned in Christian theology, and usually also learned all of the Christian sources and all of the Jewish sources. They were hugely supportive. Other Christians would be like, oh, there are no sacrifices after Jesus. And then you have pastors who know the sources in Christianity and they're like, that's not exactly true, which has been really fascinating. And that's one very nice thing that's come out of this book is I usually get more out of interviews than I give. I learn, and Pastor Biltz, God bless him, Jesus used the red heifer.
Right.
Jesus was healing lepers. So he was certainly becoming impure. So he needed the ashes of the red heifer if he wanted to go up to the Temple Mount. People are like, oh, but he didn't sin. We're not talking about sin. We're talking about impurity.
Ritual impurity, yeah.
And every knowledgeable Christian that I've spoken to has been like, of course, that's simple. And of course there's going to be a third temple. We have to have a third temple. And Pastor Biltz was like, hey, we should have built it for you 1,000 years ago. And I'm like, whoa, he's amazing. Yeah. And what's crazy is Pastor Biltz, if you know him, he's brilliant and he's incredibly devout, has a really inspiring connection to Jesus. And some of the comments were like, is he Christian? And I'm like, yes, he's Christian. He's just a different kind of Christian.
Right, yeah. So for the temple to be built and the temple service to be instituted, you don't have to have the red heifers, but to be able to bring to be able to participate fully in the temple services and to be able to bring all of the offerings, you need the red heifers.
Correct. What's interesting is you don't even need the temple. All we need, Jews are not permitted to bring sacrifices anywhere since King David established the Temple Mount and consecrated it. We are not allowed to bring sacrifices anywhere else except for where the altar stood in both of the temples. It's because the Bible talks about, when Hashem chooses his place, and he never says where the place is. And then King David comes along and says, this is it. So we don't need the temple. And even when the Jews came back from the Babylonian exile, they didn't build a temple, but they started the temple service right away. But they didn't build a temple. So that's kind of like where we're holding right now, except we haven't even started the temple service. We really should have.
So is it kind of like it could be one or the other? Which one comes first, the temple or the red heifer?
No. That's an interesting question. Yes, it is a question of which will come first. We have a tradition that between the time of Moses until after the destruction of the temple, there were 9 red heifers. Because a red heifer, the ashes from one red heifer can purify 1 billion. I think it's even several billion. So they didn't need that many, and they were exceedingly rare. So there were only 9, and we have a tradition that the 10th one will be to purify Israel for the Messiah.
Wow.
So that's what we're looking for now. But there's a lot of questions about whether the Messiah will build the temple, whether we'll build the temple, whether we'll start building the temple.
Right,
There's a lot of different opinions about that.
There's something about the red heifers that we have to talk about too, and that is, this also blew my mind, but when October 7th happened, very quickly, Hamas started claiming that literally they started this war and invaded Israel because of some red cows that were in Shiloh, and the cows that the cows that you went to welcome and write about at Ben Gurion Airport, that they ended up in Shiloh. And literally Hamas is saying, like, this is what the war is about. And that,
right. And Hezbollah as well.
To this day, I'm like, how in the world? Like, not only are we talking about red cows from Texas that were brought to Israel by a Christian man,
right.
And now are in Shiloh, and they were hoping to get a red heifer from these cows. And we're talking about building the temple and offering sacrifices. But now the literal enemies of Israel are attacking Israel because of some red cows.
Very early on, it confused me because it was being called by Hamas, it was being called the Al-Aqsa flood.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, it's nowhere near Jerusalem. They attacked the south of Israel. What's the Al-Aqsa flood? And soldiers started reporting that almost every house they went into had a picture of the Dome of the Rock. They were focused they're focused on the temple, and they released the spokesman for Hamas released a statement saying that the reason why they attacked was because of the red heifers, because it was clear to them that now that we had the red heifers, we will build the third temple, and they wanted to stop it. Hezbollah as well. And what's funny is, I mean, if you look at the symbol, the emblem of Hamas, it's the Dome of the Rock with crossed swords.
Yeah.
And what's funny, ironic, sad, is that they show a picture of the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is not Al-Aqsa.
Oh, right, yeah. A lot of people don't understand that.
Right.
Either, yeah.
I think it's Kubat Sikra or something like that, Kubat Sakra. And it wasn't a mosque. And it became a mosque.
Right.
The mosque is on the southern end. It's the black dome.
And there's even a question about whether or not that's Al-Aqsa, but
exactly
that's another podcast.
Exactly, but they can't even identify Al-Aqsa.
Right. But I think that's something that's so important for people to understand, is that this conflict is so different than what people think. The conflict is always over Jerusalem. It's always over the Temple Mount.
And Jerusalem, throughout history, the only time Muslims or the Ottomans or anyone has ever been interested in the Temple Mount or Jerusalem is when someone else wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Once they have it, they're done.
Yeah.
You know, they never know kings or Muslim.
And unfortunately, Israel had the Temple Mount in their hands in 1967, and they gave the key back.
Right. And that was because Moshe Dayan and the first Israeli governments they did not want Israel to be Jewish.
Right.
And they were afraid that if we had the Temple Mount, people would be like, and that's part of when they first started the Red Heifer program, it was very, very secretive. It was secretive because people were afraid that someone would come along and try to make the cow non-kosher, which is actually incredibly easy. And we weren't just afraid of the Arabs. We were afraid that the left-wing intelligence services would try to make the cow unkosher. Because if we have the Temple Mount, it'd be like, okay, so now we got to do something with it. They don't want us to do anything with it.
Yeah, the location of the red heifers was kept secret for a while.
Exactly.
So they're in Shiloh now.
Correct.
How many are there? And
there are 5 in Shiloh.
Is the hope that there will be a red heifer coming from one of these cows, or could one of these cows actually be a kosher red heifer?
They're definitely going to be a part of a breeding program.
So none of the 5 are a kosher red heifer at this point.
Okay, you have to be very careful how you say this. And I got this directly from Rav Azari Ariel, who is in charge of the Red Heifer Project. In order for a heifer to be either kosher or non-kosher, it has to be certified. The same is true of leprosy. A person can have all the signs, but until the Kohen comes along and says he's a leper, he doesn't have leprosy. So the red heifers have to be certified in order to be considered kosher or non-kosher. Until the Kohen comes along and inspects them from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail with a magnifying glass, hair by hair, you can't say it's kosher or not kosher because it has to be checked. So the rabbis have chosen not to check these cows at this point.
Okay.
The most visitors who go and they're like, but there's all these white hairs.
Yeah.
So, and when I asked Rav Ariel, he said, it cannot be said at this time that we have a certified kosher red heifer. So
part of this is that the people of Israel have to be ready as well.
Oh, no.
But
I would say the opposite.
I'm saying in the spiritual sense, right? Like even for the temple?
No. We can't ask that question.
Okay.
We don't have the privilege to ask that question. We were commanded to do the red heifer. Mm-hmm. If we can do it, we do it. Immediately. No questions asked. We were commanded to do it. That's the way we work. You know, I don't ask, gee, am I ready to put on tefillin? No.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I don't feel ready for sukkahs. Hey, you got to build the sukkah. Shut up.
Yeah, maybe we should stop thinking like that.
Yeah, I am. Moses was referred to as a slave of God. Joshua was referred to as a servant of God. Being a slave is a much higher level. Why? Slaves never go free. And slaves don't ask questions. They're with their master 24/7. They know how he wants his coffee. They know how he likes his clothes ironed. We don't ask questions. Oh, the king said this. Well, I think no. Don't think. Just do it. And that's how we see the Torah. Torah said, do the red heifers. Don't care if we're ready or not. We got to do it if we can do it.
Maybe we should take the same approach to building the temple.
We have to. The only reason why we haven't built the temple is because the Israeli government said no. That sin, not on us. That sin is on them.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good perspective to have, because I think it's too easy to slip into the thought that, Israel has to be ready. The world has to be ready. We have to. Yeah, I think that's good.
And something, the way I see Israel today, and I love the Christians I connect with, but when I hear, Israel did this sin, Israel broke the covenant, Israel doesn't keep the commandments, I am so in love with my nation. I am crazy in love with my nation. I feel blessed 1,000 times over to be part of the story of the nation of Israel. It makes Tolkien and The Hobbit look like nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a mind-blowing saga. But when I look at this generation going out to war, and I hope I don't cry, this generation going out to war against 7 nations, little Israel against 7 nations, when all of the evil people in other nations are rising up to hate on the Jews. This is the nation, this is the generation that can bring Geula. These guys going out to Miluim, God bless them. These guys are like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
This is King David. This is King
David's
stuff.
Army, yeah.
Yeah. And they do it with joy. They're like, we're protecting the nation of Israel. Don't tell me that we're not ready. When was the last time we saw a generation like this?
Yeah.
When is the last time we saw the nations coming to help us? Hiram helped us build the temple.
Yeah.
Iran, you complain about Iran? Cyrus sent us home and gave us gold and silver and all the utensils.
Maybe there's hope for Iran.
There's definitely hope for Iran. Iran can flip over tomorrow. There's a Christian revival going there. I see the Christians in Iran coming up to Israel saying, we want peace with you. We want to be, you were forget about Hamas and their Al-Aqsa thing. That's ridiculous. We want the Temple Mount and the Jews. They revered King Cyrus as their greatest leader in history. King Cyrus. So if they get half a chance, they'll be like, please, we want to be like King Cyrus. We want you to build the temple with our blessing.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think we could go for another hour on all of these topics, or 2 hours, maybe. I think it's important also to recognize, and by the way, thank you for making the long drive from the Golan to come down here. I think it's important to recognize that I'm a Christian Zionist. I am unabashed Zionist, right? I'm sitting here on Har Bracha in a studio talking to an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who has been writing primarily to Christians for 10 years. And now I think you're even engaging and having these conversations with Christians from all over the world. But it's out of a place of mutual respect. It's out of a place of, it's no secret. I mean, it's public. We have a public stance against missionizing and proselytizing in Israel because we so deeply believe that Christians should be here supporting your Jewish identity in the land of Israel. And I think it's just important to note that these conversations need to happen. It's important for Christians to connect with Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz in the Golan and to read, your book about the red heifer because God is doing something amazing in Israel.
Yes.
And it's being broadcast to the world.
Yes, it is not just for Israel. We were not given the Torah for just us. The third temple will not be a synagogue. It'll be a house of prayer for all nations.
Amen.
That thing about proselytizing. I understand that evangelizing is an essential part of Christianity. I think that the concept of converting people and getting more people on your team is directly from Rome. It's the paganism that stayed in Catholicism. It's Esav, Edom, that needs to conquer. It's not from Jesus. He was not a conqueror. Muhammad was a conqueror. Yeah. Rome was a conqueror. I can't tell Christians how to circle that square. I know it's part of their
right. Yeah.
And I think when I hear Christians say, "Oh no, we can't evangelize the Jews, we can't proselytize," other Christians will say, "Oh, they're not Christian."
Right.
So I can't circle that square for you, but I think it's the biggest obstacle to the final redemption.
Well, and I think, and not to get into another topic either, but I think regardless of, again, that whole topic, regardless of what people think, I think we have to recognize the times we're living in right now. We have to recognize the massive move of God in the world. We have to recognize that Geulah, redemption, is happening in Zion, and that light's going forth to the world. And we just did another podcast that we have to recognize that there's real danger for Christians and Jews in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to wake up to our God-given identity, wake up to our scriptures, and wake up to the fact that we all need to stand with God, with his covenant, with his promises, which is ultimately his kingdom in Israel.
Yeah.
And we can work together towards that.
Not for us, for you. You got to do it for you.
Right. Yeah. Because there's a very real danger, and we're seeing it amongst these so-called Christians, a lot of Catholics coming against Israel. And that is a redemption issue.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
So you moved to Israel how long ago?
I came to Israel 17 years ago. Yeah, I started living here full time maybe 5 years ago. Yeah.
Married and kids?
Mm-hmm.
And you live in a place, we were talking about how you used to have to drive through Harar, which is where all the horrible terrorist attacks were happening. You're literally on the front line. I laugh at, I want these Nashville Christians, on my side. Do you feel blessed?
I do feel blessed. Yeah. The blessing is here, I think. And the blessing is aligning with God's kingdom and God's people, God's land. And I think the goal is to want that same blessing for the nations of the world.
Yes.
And that's where the blessing is. It's not about, Israel is the special chosen people and we have to, serve Israel. It is about that, but it's about the opportunity to step into the story of the blessing and be part of it.
I think you put that perfectly.
And we have that choice.
We have the choice.
And we have to make the right decision.
And I look at you guys. I look at purple-haired keffiyeh wearing yupsters in New York City, and I'm like, you're blessed. These guys are lost.
Yeah. I don't know how I ended up here. I heard your story. You probably don't fully know how you ended up here either. I think God puts us all on a journey, and somewhere, at some point, at 16 years old for me, God put me in Israel. I had no clue at all, but God gave me that opportunity, and I'm forever grateful. And
amen.
I know the blessing is here with God's kingdom and God's people and God's land. So we could keep going and going and going. Everybody needs to read this book, your latest book, Return of the Red Heifers, Paving the Road to Redemption. And I'm starting a new book called Signposts. I think it's going to be Signpost something or something like that. It's going to be all the signs that we are seeing that show us that redemption is happening in real time. Amazing. I started reading this. I really want to read the rest. By the way, an amazing, as like an amateur writer, you're a very good writer. Really love your work, and the fact that you've written
so
5,000 articles in 10 years is just incredible.
This is my 4th book that's been published.
And there will be more.
And there will be more,
sure.
God
so
willing.
we'll
God
link
willing.
down below so you guys can connect with Eliyahu Berkowitz. Definitely need to read his book, read his other books, connect with his articles at Israel 365 News. So glad to have you. Such a pleasure for you to be here. Thank you so much.
You have great
Eliyahu
coffee,
Berkowitz.
so that helps.